It can be, right? Like, I think I'm probably just restating what I said before, which is like when it goes well, it can be really enriching. And what people like uh, often crave and are looking for is community, is connection in a broader context where they're seen and they're validated, they have something to contribute. So if you're part of a group where you're all operating at a certain level, exploring certain topics, and it's enriching, like people get a ton out of that, a ton. But again, if you're responsible for that group, then just like enough time passes and you throw something like psychedelics in the mix, which is like huge amplifier in itself, and a kind of potentially destabilizer, just like proceed with caution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then in that context, how do you hold that sense of responsibility when you work? Because especially when I'm sharing a book or a resource or a podcast episode or put some information on the table, my understanding, and that's well contracted, is that, well, we're meeting at eye level, my client take responsibility for what they do and what they don't do. But I do have responsibility when I share information. And so I wonder how you're navigating that, how you're holding that sense of responsibility, and how do you contract for it, if at all?
I'm not sure if I understand the question. How do I contract for it? How do you hold that responsibility?
Like when
I think you have to be humble, right? I think it's really about finding a line between like your own sort of like confidence, right? Your own experience, right? So you're able to instill some kind of confidence, right? And also being humble, and also being, leaving room for your own fallibility, your own blind spots. And you have to trust people at a certain point that they're gonna, you can't, you're not there holding their hand. You're not their actual parent. You know what I mean? You have to trust them at a certain point. So I think it's about finding that balance. And like, it can be very intuitive. Certain people are going to respond more to more confidence. Some people really want your answers, and those are the folks that you have to be, more cautious with, potentially, right? Because people will just hand over they're really confused. They'll just hand over their agency. And do you really want that? Probably not. Like, you need to be cautious with those folks. And then others who may be more skeptical, and that's where you need to like find little ways to sort of like poke and get yourself on even ground. I don't know if I'm maybe getting a little obtuse here, but I do think it's going to depend from case to case. Very intuitive thing.
I think it can be very seductive when you're meeting somebody who really is eager to get your knowledge, and who relates to you as an expert, and who looks up to you. And I think if we get caught up in those kind of games, in a kind of Bernian transactional way, then I think it can be seductive that we allow ourselves to be in that role of the expert and the experienced psychedelic practitioner who shares information. And I think that's where we need to be careful. And that's why the sense of responsibility comes in, especially when we say, well, these are some of the dosages that are commonly taken for these kind of purposes. And somebody who's highly sensitive, for example, one of our podcast team is just like, he probably needs to take like, 20% of what other people take, and he has the same effect. And that's, if he were to take the dose that is commonly recommended, he would have quite the experience. So if I were to recommend something like that, then I feel I have some responsibility for having shared that information. I think it's my client's responsibility to take whatever information I put on the table and critically evaluate it. But in reality, a lot of clients will just take your information and go home and just do that. Because often coaching is seen as this accelerator or this shortcut, so that clients don't have to put the work in. Just you coach me through this. Tell me how this is done and how I can the best result from it. And then they go and run with it. Now, that's where the responsibility would weigh heavy on me. So in the context of psychedelics, I'm probably sharing a lot less than in my other coach practice. I already share relatively little because existential work is a lot about big questions and there isn't really an answer that I can share. But with psychedelics, I'm really careful how much responsibility I'm taking on, and have a really clear agreement that whatever I say, whatever I might even suggest, or whatever information I share, it's really up to you to keep yourself safe and hold yourself accountable.
Yeah, and that's just
maybe too much. I don't know.
Harm. That's just good harm reduction. And I think you have to do the job of reinforcing that for their protection and for your own. You know what I mean? Like, you have to be clear that these are decisions they're making themselves. You're doing your best to share knowledge, but it's not you prescribing or encouraging them in a particular direction or another. And look, some people, might be turned off by that. Some people might, I've had that occasionally where folks are just sort of frustrated, like, well, they're just like, no, just tell me, like, what is it? Just tell me what to do. And I don't feel like I know confidently enough about them or about whatever the situation is to give them much more than that. And you have to be okay with someone walking away unsatisfied. That's an important point. But I think if there is some humility there, and it's good to have been humbled yourself, and it's good to have some kind of like just a cosmic sense of humor about things, and to like not take yourself so seriously. If that humility will come through sometimes, like and I think that helps people realize that, like, they're, at the end of the day, they might be on their own. You know what I mean? Even though we're all in it together, but on the other hand, you might be on your own. I think, like, if you are sufficiently kind of like have that sense of humor and humility, like, with yourself, that should probably come through, and they'll take whatever they get from you lightly, as